Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy, and do you have a washable air filter in your car? It's something you should maintain, and I want to show you how to do it. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit before we do it. And this is just gonna be a reminder or a quick refresher on how to maintain your air filter in your car. So if you have a washable oiled air filter, this really is gonna work for any car at all. Now, I'm gonna be using in my BMW, and I'm gonna show you the couple of steps on how to take it out. But the process of cleaning and maintaining your air filter is gonna be pretty much exactly the same. As far as all of the oiled air filters, now I have BMCs in my car, but I've worked with the top 3 or 4 brands. They're all essentially exactly the same. So these instructions are gonna work for you no matter what car you have and really no matter what brand you have of an oiled air filter. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the car. I'm gonna show you how to get these out. This is a BMW M2 Competition, so it has 2 air filters. Your car might have 2, it might have 1, depends on your car. But let's jump into the motor and let's get started. All right, so it may be possible to do this work with the strut bar out, but I'm gonna do so in this case, not only to make it a little more obvious on what we're doing, but a little bit easier to get to. So if you find a way to do this without removing the strut bar, that's fantastic. It's just gonna be a lot tighter space to work with. But in removing the strut bar, the very first thing you wanna do is take off these upper plastic covers. So you're gonna pull out the plastic pin on the corner right there and pull that expanding rivet out, and then you've got quarter turn 10mm plastic nuts across the top. So quarter turn them to move the little lever, and then these covers will come off. Now, as always, on this side, you've got your positive battery post. I'm gonna get a rubber glove to cover the post once I have that exposed, because when you pull this out, you wanna be really careful you don't hit your positive battery post. Now, lastly, the grommet on this side will lift, so you can just take it out. There are 2 13mm bolts here and here. Your car, if it's an M3 or an M4, you might have 3 bolts up here at the top. But there's 1, 2, 13mm, 1, 2 in the front. I have a little bit different bolts. I'll speak to those in just a second. There are 2 short 13mm across the front and the 13mm in the back. So once you pull these covers off, you pull those 13mm bolts on both sides, lift the rubber grommet on that side, and slide the whole thing out. Now, in my case, obviously, I do not have the default OEM bolts. If you haven't seen my video on my dress-up bolts, you should. These are really, really cool. So if you've changed your bolts out, use an Allen wrench or whatever the appropriate tool is to get your bolts out. In this case, it's a 6mm Allen to take these big bolts out. I love these kits. They look great. So go ahead and take your strut bar off, and then we're going to continue forward. All right, so now that the air boxes are out, let's take a look at them really quickly. So there's going to be these T25 bolts all the way around, and these are secured into the top. So it is possible to do this by just cracking all of these with your strut brace still in place, and then slide the filters out. I wanted to show you what this fully looked like to do it, and also there's been a couple of times where I've backed one of these out accidentally far enough that I've dropped it, and that's a drag. So for me, it's worth it to take the little bit of extra effort to take my strut bar off. Okay, so I'm going to open these up and go ahead and take out my filters, and I'll show you what they look like now that they've been in for over a year. All right, y'all, not too bad, but definitely it's got some gunk. You can see kind of this arc on one side. You can see across the edge of the other. So, you know, when I first pulled them out, I'm like, man, they're not that bad at all. But, you know, once I flipped them over and got a good look at them, yeah, they definitely need some love. It's been a pretty dusty year, and we've had some fires around here, so they definitely got some smoke particles in here. So it's good to clean them. So you're going to want to take your cleaning solution provided in the kit. You're going to run it in beads down each one of the veins and give it 10 minutes to soak in. And then you're going to wash it out very gently with a hose, and you want it to go through in the air direction, right? So don't force it the wrong way. So make sure that when you look at your filters, that you're pushing the air through the proper side, right? So this is the clean side. You wash from the clean side out the dirty side. That way you're not forcing dirt further up into the clean side. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to soak all these down, or put all the cleaning solution on, let it sit 10 minutes, and then wash them out. All right, so I'll post-wash, both looking significantly better. So now I'm just going to put them up in a safe space to dry. I normally give this process about 24 hours. Now, it could be that they're drier sooner, but I usually set them out for about 24 hours to make sure that they are completely dry before we re-oil. And I'll show you that process once we're ready, but now I'm just going to put them up, put it in a good safe place, Don't put them out in the sun. They may cause them to shrink. You don't want the material to shrink at all. Don't force air through them. Don't force heat through them. Just put them in a good safe place and let them air dry out on their own. It's okay to gently shake out the additional water because that'll help, and that might cut down your drying time a little bit depending on where you are. But now we're just going to put them up. Next time we come back, they'll be all dry and we'll oil them. All right, y'all, welcome to about 24 hours later, and both filters are now completely dry. Now, I'm not going to actually do this work directly over the motor, but hey, I had good lighting here, so I thought I'd show you. So this is where the instructions can be a little bit contradictory here from BMC, and they show an aerosol oil or an oil bottle, depending on which one you get. Obviously, I've got the bottle. So what you're going to want to do, and this is very similar to some of the other brands I've seen. So what I'll do, that once the filter is dry, I will take the bottle and put a very small track of the oil down each one of the ribs here in the filter. You don't want to over oil. You don't want this thing to be completely soaked, because that's where I think sometimes you see the criticism of oiled air filters come from, potentially fouling your mass airflow sensor. I think it's really when these become wildly over oiled. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to lay the bead down each one of these and then give it about half an hour just to sit and settle on a level surface. If there's any spots that look dry or are this more white red, you know, really light red, then I'm just going to add a little bit of oil to go through. Okay, so go ahead and lay the tracks on each one of the veins, give it about half an hour to settle, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. All right, so the filters are oiled and ready to go, and you can see they're pretty much even coated all the way through. There's a couple of spots on this one that are just a little bit light right there on the corners. I might touch them up kind of there and there, just a little bit. Keep in mind, if you do touch it up, you're going to want to give it a little bit of time to wick and make sure that it dries out. There's no standing oil. There's nothing coming off, you know, on the filters themselves, so they're pretty much good to go. So once your filters are done, just go ahead and insert them back into the intake boxes themselves. You know, bolt those T25s back down and then put the intakes back in place. On the passenger side here, on this side, I find it easier to, again, push that collar back hard to help you settle this box in. You don't want to press on the pipe, but just compress the collar right here at the flex point. This pipe actually has a plastic arm that comes down with a 10mm bolt that holds it into place. I've actually broken that off once because I was applying too much pressure to that pipe. The pipe will stay in place while that's broken, but it's a drag and it's something that you want to avoid. Here in the front, what I normally will do once it's ready to go is I will tip this end in first to get it secure in the pipe, and then fit it down around your reservoir, down onto the rubber feet and down into place. Obviously I haven't done that yet because I need to double check my filters, but it really is that simple. So go ahead and reassemble your air boxes. Once the filters are back in, go ahead and settle them back down into place, tighten down your collars, and you're pretty much good to go, with the exception of the strut brace in this case. All right, so one last double check with the intakes in before we put the strut bar back on. Make sure you've plugged your MAF sensor in on both sides, and on this case, this is where a double check is a good idea. I've got my coolant hose in place, but I don't have my vacuum hose on. So you just take that and press it until it clicks. So both MAFs, the vacuum hose, my coolant hose is back down into the clips. Whatever clamps you're using here on these pipes, remember that this is plastic into plastic. You know, they just need to be snug on these intakes, right? So make sure that they're on firmly. Make sure that your intakes are down and all in the right places. Nothing is gapped on your clamps or anything else like that. That's good to go. Now, with your strut bar, all you need to do is feed it back in through the hole on that side, lay it down on this side, put the rubber grommet back over, and put the 13mm. You've got 2 or 3 at each end, like we took out. You've got the 2 in front. I will have the torque values for those bolts in the video description, so make sure to check that out. Once that's done, go ahead and put your plastic covers back on. Remember those 10mm quarter turns across the top and the plastic rivets on the corner, and you're pretty much good to go. I'll give you one last view of that when it's all done, but good job, you're basically done. All right, so one last look. Pretty much everything's all buttoned up and ready to go. Just do one last pass to make sure that everything's plugged in. Vacuum hose, like I mentioned, your MAF sensors, everything is down. Make sure that your strut bar is torqued down, and you're pretty much good to go. This is really a basic maintenance thing that, like I said, I do about once a year, and I find it worth it to make sure to maintain my engine in its top running quality. All right, go ahead and clean up and put your tools away, and you can tell this isn't a hard project at all, and this is something that you can really do for almost any car. Now, granted, the disassembly and reassembly has been very, very targeted at my particular BMW, but this is something that you could use as a general guideline for almost any washable air filter you can put in any model of car. If I used one of my other cars, I could have had it out in just a few seconds, just after a few clips. This car is a little bit more complicated, which is why I wanted to show it. This is something that you should definitely take a look at. Keep an eye on your conditions and what the manufacturer recommends on how often you should clean your filters. But at the same time, if you're in a really dusty or really smoky or otherwise environment where they may get dirty more often, this is something you should do pretty regularly. I really appreciate you watching. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. It's going to make a huge difference to my channel, and I have a ton of content coming I cannot wait to show you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next project.